Well, it is almost Friday, which means it is time to take a look at all the fun things happening this weekend. And it is going to be another jam-packed weekend here in the Middle Ohio Valley. So, of course, we got Artsbridge and Jeff Dewitt back with us once again. Good morning.
Good morning, Henry. How are you?
I am doing well.
Good.
But, of course, still talking about rain.
A little bit.
There is some good news for the weekend.
There is. Tonight, 6:30 to 8 p.m., we're down to the final two, folks. The final two Artsbridge Summer Music Series. Tonight is Stephen Givens opening for Track 9. Track 9, a local favorite, great horn section, be some awesome music. And that's tonight at the City Park Bandshell in Parkersburg. If it does happen to rain, we will be under the horseshoe pit. But either way, it's going to go on. So remember, then next week is the showcase of bands.
Okay.
So that'll be our wrap up, and come out and support the kids in the high school bands. Then Friday and Saturday, Friday starting at 5:30, the Parkersburg Homecoming. And that's at Bicentennial Park on Market Street here in Parkersburg, but it's an annual tradition of homecoming.
Okay.
Then Saturday morning, 8 a.m., make your plans accordingly, the News and Sentinel Half Marathon. And that's on Market Street in Parkersburg, so always a big event. Some traffic rerouting to be able to have the runners go. And then Saturday evening, 6:30 to 8:30, Super Sleuth, Catch a Murderer Dinner Cruise. And that's on the Valley Gym Sternwheeler, and you can find that on Upper Front Street in Marietta. And then Sunday, all day, America 250th Festival of Living History. Again, that's in Marietta, and that's in Muskingum Park on Front Street. So very active weekend this weekend. We should have some breaks in the rain. Would you agree?
We should. We should. Saturday definitely going to be looking good.
Yep. So there we are. Lots of activities this weekend. Go on and check the calendar. And where do we find that, Henry?
I think it's at the bottom of your screen, artsbridgeonline.org.
That was his turn to say that, folks. We thank everybody for their support. Remember, the jingle contest still going on, and the Dueling Pianos fundraiser celebration of our 40th anniversary birthday. So,
well, again, we want to thank you so much for coming in this morning, Jeff.
Thank you, Henry.
It's going to be a fun weekend, so hopefully everybody is able to get outside and enjoy it, but we'll probably see you again next week.
I believe you will.
And
yes.
We'll have more on Daybreak right after the break.